think hopefully today we have a great day of sailing, so go and have some fun first of all, and then try and keep our scores as low as we can, but just stay in the game really.
Using the SAP analytics, we've been able to dive down and look at their individual speed and looking at it across all of their races. And when we take an average of their speed across all 7 races, they have been the quickest boat. Of course, that doesn't tell the whole story, but it certainly gives some reason to why Mike Holt and Carl Schmidt are world champions.
Morning from Annapolis, USA, and the 505 Worlds. We're at the Eastport Yacht Club, who have teamed up with the Severn Sailing Association to host this championship, and what a fabulous backdrop that they have given us. Well, in the studio with me, Corky Rhodes, ready to do all the data analytics off the racecourse, but we really should start by saying congratulations to Mike Holt and Carl Schmidt, who won their 2nd world title together yesterday, so with a day to spare. Tremendous performance. Oh, just phenomenal. Consistent throughout the whole regatta. Haven't really wobbled at any point, and again put themselves in a position to go out and be crowned champions, and that's done exactly that. Okay, well, let's hear from our new world champions. I caught up with them as soon as they came off the water yesterday. Mike, your 3rd world title. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It was fun. Tough racing, but good fun.
Tough and long.
Really hard, yeah. I mean, we've had really different conditions every day, and it's been a brain game. It's been really hard work, and then today was windy, 3 big races. So yeah, tough week.
Carl, your 2nd world championship title, and on home waters.
Yeah, it's good to win on the home turf. Although Mike and I have never felt particularly strong in the light stuff, and I think with the shifts and the puffs out on the course here, We're really pleased with how we sailed. I think there were some tough calls that we made, and we powered through. So
he's sort of American, but he's British, really. How's it feel to have to be, ordered around and do what a Briton tells you?
Well, I'm married to a Brit, so I'm kind of used to it.
This boat, I mean, Mike, you must be very proud of it.
Yeah, this boat's fantastic. We've now won 3 worlds in this boat. No other 5.0 has won 3 worlds, and she's got a 2nd as well. So yeah, she's a fantastic boat. I think when we're done, she's smart and gets us out of trouble. So yeah, the boat's fantastic. Couldn't do it without this one.
How many more titles are you going to go for?
Oh, well, it's Poland next year, but let's see how we do there. So Poland, Fremantle, and then Bermuda, all look like good fun ones, so we'll just keep rolling the dice and see what happens.
So the champions are crowned, but we still have one final race to enjoy here in Annapolis, and we are just a few seconds away from that Pathfinder boat that you can see in shot. And I'm not talking about the ship, I'm talking about the 505 in the foreground. It'll head off and open up the start line. And for those who join us for the first time, Corky, just explain this starting procedure.
So Pathfinder boat there, heading off on port on a close-hauled course with the rib and the flag behind it. You'll see the rest of the fleet now heading in behind that boat, and each boat will have to duck behind it to start the race. So the Pathfinder will find itself over towards that right-hand side of the race course. That's one of those 50-50 sort of decisions, and that's just the nature of when you finish 10th in the race before, you end up being that Pathfinder boat. So you can see great shots on board here from the Pathfinder boat, and those boats all lined up on starboard, all preparing to duck down behind, accelerate at full speed behind the back of the boat. With only 6 to 8 knots out on the racecourse at the moment, it's all about coming on with speed. So Smith and Gilbert on board there, just duck behind the back of the Pathfinder, have started sort of 15-20 boats up from that Pathfinder.
So they are our second placed boat, and what's at stake here today is that the top few boats are all battling it out for silver and bronze for the final 2 podium places. We'll look at the overall leaderboard and just discuss the possible permutations in a moment, but we want to stick with the start for the moment. Conditions today, well, it is sunny again, little cooler than on previous days. It was absolutely boiling here on our balcony studio yesterday. A little bit more chilly today. We're going to reach 20 degrees eventually. Breeze 6 to 9 knots, so lighter than yesterday, and from the north as well.
So you can see the fleet all lined up, and actually a lot of these boats now quite a long way back from that start line boat. As a big lift comes in from this left hand side, you can see how much this gate boat's being lifted up on port and boats being left way back behind it. The idea is you cross round the back of the boat as quickly as you possibly can and accelerate towards that side, but at the moment this lift is ginormous, and you can see there as we pan out just how big it is, and all of these guys on this right hand side being caught out a long way. They're trying to track back for this start, so that's the bad thing about the gate starts, is you can easily get caught out.
Father and son team from Germany are our pathfinders, Tim and Finn Berger from Hamburg. They finished 10th in our final race yesterday, and that gives them the Pathfinder role.
So this big left shift sees many of the key guys looking to hold on to those top spots, taking that tack onto port as well and tracking with the Pathfinder boat, but certainly puts the Pathfinder in a very strong place. The angle between the Pathfinder boat and where everyone is headed at the moment is a colossal difference. It's really caught out a lot of the boats on this fleet, and they've struggled to get back, and certainly not the start that many of them want there. And that, looking back at that Pathfinder boat, so you can see the Pathfinder boat stopped now, and the rest of the boats all have to go behind the back of that Pathfinder boat. So that releases the German team to be able to keep on going, and everyone else is still ducking behind the back of that rib to start that race. But look at the difference and the lead that these guys have straight away from being that gate boat, getting that initial shift that has played into the hands of the German team there.
Now we can see from the overall leaderboard the battle for a podium place still wide open. Andy Smith and Roger Gilbert of Great Britain will be looking to hold that second place spot for silver, but their advantage is a slim 4 points on Americans Conrad and Haynes. The 2016 champions Martin and Lowry sitting in 5th could still mathematically manage a top 3 finish as well. Got a fleet of around 80 boats left here. Our champions, by the way. Okay, so just hearing that this race is abandoned.
Due to the wind. It'll be down to the wind. The wind
is just too fluky out there at the moment. I think the direction has changed. We're just checking the data on that. But this race, only race scheduled for today, has been stopped, and I would guess that they're now all going to head back and try and start this race again.
Yeah, exactly. From that pitch you can see there, the bottom right corner, that was your gate boat, the German team there. And we saw as they started to track off on that port close haul course as part of their job at the gate boat, they gradually got lifted higher and higher and higher, and we saw a bulk of the fleet unable to properly start behind that boat because of the radical change in direction.
So why has it taken them this number of minutes to stop the race?
Because they might let it run for a certain few minutes. So when we saw the gate boat tack back out, we saw it was actually around 4 minutes, 3.5, 4 minutes, which isn't long into the actual race course itself. So what the race committee will have been doing is to see whether that wind started to go back. It might have just started to move, but then it could have gone back and it could have settled back down. So if that had happened, that's just a natural part of the race course, and that's a shift. But when there's something that's carried on moving and it's created a radical change in the shift and created an unfair playing field, or certainly the waters out there for the boats to race on, then it's easier to pull them all back and restart the race again.
Well, that's going to take a while. The turnaround on these large courses does take a while, and they have sailed for, what, about 5 minutes?
Yes, about that.
And, of course, they'll be waiting. Well, are they going to wait for this shift, or do you think they're resetting the course?
I think they'll go out, they'll alter the race course quite quickly, and they'll go back and potentially reset the start. It was only really the start that was the large effect because of that, and because it was only a few minutes off the start, it's easier to go back, restart it in the same way as a false start in athletics or anything else. It's easier to drag everyone back, restart it, and give it a fair shot again, and that's what they needed to do here. So hopefully they'll be able to turn it around quite quickly. The Pathfinder boat will remain the German team there, father and son team. They will have that responsibility once again of the gate boat. So we'll go into the countdown. They'll nip behind the back of the starting boat, head out on port as they did before. But I'm sure they'll be pretty gutted that that race was stopped, because that was all playing into their hands then.
And what we've found in the past is that if you're a Pathfinder, either it's great for you or it's bad for you. There doesn't seem to be anything in between.
No, well, you've got a certain commitment and due diligence, what you've actually got to do as a Pathfinder, and sail for a certain distance out on that port-hand tack, which takes you to the right-hand side of that course. And because of that, on that right-hand side of the course, if that breeze favours that left-hand side, all of the other boats are heading out towards that left-hand side. So because of that, the impact is fairly substantial. So it means that you've got less options. You've already got to sail one side of the course. So Smith and Gilbert on board, second place.
For these guys, it looks like it's an opportunity to get a few calories into themselves, and they'll want to stay. They'll want to stay focused for this race. They're in second place, and it's their position to lose, really, with a 4-point advantage on the third-placed Edward Conrads and Brian Haynes.
Well, and interesting, just before that race got cancelled, it was Conrad and Haynes who came out of that starting block a little bit earlier, but hit that shift earlier, and actually were leading Smith and Gilbert by some way before that race got canned. So potentially a little bit of sigh of relief as well that happened, because they need to, of course, have a good race to keep themselves in that second spot.
Much lighter winds than those we saw yesterday here in Annapolis on Chesapeake Bay. Almost glassy out there right now. It's Friday morning, and I'm hearing that they're hoping to restart this race in about 6 minutes' time, at 21 minutes past the hour. It's 10:15 in the morning here in Annapolis, wherever you're watching around the world online. We hope to have an entertaining race for you to enjoy, a race that will probably last about an hour and a half. It'll be obviously take a little while longer than yesterday's racing, but we saw a real variety of times, and we've got to admit abilities as well in the fleet yesterday, with the front boats finishing in about an hour 15, hour 20, and the rear of the fleet coming in a good half an hour after that. But Mike Holt and Carl Smith said they were quite restrained yesterday as far as partying's concerned. They had fun. They had, I think, quite a few beers. Celebrated their win, but it wasn't a massively late night for them. And they're out on the water today, not taking part. No need to take part. The title is theirs. They're out on the water, just enjoying, hopefully, the action that will get underway in a few minutes' time here in Annapolis. And it's been a wonderful host venue over the last 10 days or so, with the pre-worlds that helped everyone train and warm up. And for some national associations, it was also used as their national championships. So the sailors have been down here, a fleet of 87 boats from 12 nations have been down here for a couple of weeks now. And today we'll see them finally say farewell to Annapolis, and I think they will leave feeling that it's been pretty successful as a regatta. Although, and Corky, I'll bring you in on this because you were commentating on the early stages of the World Championships. As a regatta, we did have a few light wind problems early on, which is unusual for this part of the world.
Yeah, rightly so. It's been a tricky regatta for all of these sailors. Very unusual conditions. A lot of it down to the effects of the hurricanes that have happened in the States and across the Caribbean, and have just really slowed down a bit of the usual cycle from the wind, where you get the cooler climates, the colder breezes coming down from the north. And again, we've had some fairly unusual temperatures. Today, I think, is getting back down to more where these temperatures should be. But these lighter winds have certainly plagued the race course over many days. So even on the first day of racing, only managed to get one race done. The second one abandoned due to not enough wind, and then they lost the whole of the second day. So it has been tricky, but they certainly were blessed with some superb conditions yesterday. And I think because that's been in the latter part of this event, that's how everyone will go home feeling pretty pleased that this has been a great championship. And as you say, I'm sure Holt and Smith will claim it as a very good championship.
Situated on the mouth of the Severn River, these two yacht clubs hosting this event. The Severn Sailing Association and the Eastport Yacht Club, located on the Chesapeake Bay in one of North America's best sailing locations. You just have to look around and see the number of boats and the number of pleasure craft out on the water to know that this place has a huge maritime heritage, and no less than the home of the US Navy since 1845. A fact worth saluting. Looks like our Pathfinders will be soon getting into position, and in a couple of minutes, hopefully, heading off to restart this race with a slight change in course. Can you tell from the data?
All they've done is that it just looks like they've had a slight shuffle of that top mark, but only slightly. I think what they've been happy with is that the course is in a good position. There was just that one-off wind shift that was too great in angle, and that wind has gone back to where it was, but they might see that if something like that happens again, they would let it run. So we'll see how it goes. But here's your Pathfinder on the screen, a nice bright yellow boat to make it easy for all of those boats to spot as they come across. You can see the rib behind them. The flag will follow in behind them to make sure that everyone nips behind that Pathfinder boat, and after a set distance, that Pathfinder boat, the rib will stop, and it frees the boat who is the gate boat, and enables them to get back on to their race but everyone else that's misjudged it has to dip behind. So here we are into the last few seconds. Around that red mark, the jib comes on, the main sheet comes on. There are some boats very early into this section of the start.
This German boat, one of a fleet of 5 German boats, the 505, has a lot of history and a lot of followers in Germany. Indeed, the most successful 505 sailor, Wolfgang Hunger, who isn't here in Annapolis competing, but he does have 5 World Championship titles to his name. And I asked Mike Holt yesterday, now he's got 3, will he be chasing Hunger's record of 5? Will he be chasing it down? And the answer was, yeah, I reckon. How's this start going, Corky?
Well, looking at these images, it looks like there has been an incident on the start. Trying to figure it out a little bit. I could see defending.
It's a general recall.
There we go. So you could instantly see defending champions Martin and Lowry peel out quite early on before that start. And suddenly you could see all the boats bearing away, trying to dodge. And you can see this is all starting to happen. Okay, the breeze was the big factor on that last start and why they abandoned it and came back to a restart. But you can see everyone's got itchy trigger fingers. They want to get going. They want to race. The problem is this is burning up time where there is a limited amount of time where this breeze is going to hold on. This breeze is due to die as the day goes on. And certainly we're just a couple of knots off that barrier as it is. So we've certainly not got a lot to play with. And any time that will be wasted on this could affect the racing as it goes on. So we were doing a little bit of a chat with you, Alec, on your flags and the general recall flag. Do you remember what flag that was? Oh, the head on the table. The worry. That was, don't worry. We've got your back here. It's a nice navy triangle with a yellow triangle tucked in. And you'll see that on that starting boat, all timed up, ready to go. So you'll see these boats all meander back to the start line and reset.
Of course, it would probably be clearer if they had just an app, really. And a general recall just vibrates your phone 3 times or something in your pocket in this modern digital age.
But you're not allowed your phone or communication devices
on the
boat.
That's very true. That's very true.
So if your phone vibrates in your car, it's probably still not going to help massively.
That's very true.
So you can see it is light out on that water, and that's what's catching quite a lot of these boats up. Trying to find where to position yourself exactly to be able to come out towards that start boat, that gate boat, with speed. And if you mistime it, and that's why we saw on that last one, even with that wind shift, a lot of people late up onto that start. We've got only about 6 knots of breeze out there now. So we're 1 knot off what the barrier requires. You've got to have a minimum of 5 knots, stable 5 knots, for a race to commence. So it's pretty painstaking for these sailors. 6.3. We need to get this racing going. But I'm sure a little bit of relief from Mike Holt and Carl Smith, sitting, as you mentioned, Alec, from the spectator boat or sideline boat, just watching this racing unfold, and probably pretty pleased that their championship wasn't all being decided by this final race.
Absolutely. And I guess that's why they all worked hard to get 3 races away yesterday. It was exhausting for many of the sailors. The conditions were pretty breezy. I think we hit 17 knots at one point, and that's a lot of hard work for the crews. And in fact, there were a few crews that actually withdrew and had a few breakages. And when we spoke to them afterwards, we found that really it seemed that the trapeze gear that they were wearing, the hook, on many of the withdrawn boats had broken.
Yeah, it did sound like there's been a bit of an issue with some of the trapeze hooks, or not the actual hook, the actual area that they clip in on the boat, the trapeze ring, and there seems to be a little bit weakened area, and so it's creating a little bit of a friction and a break. So they have just been addressing that and looking at other options, but it certainly cost Howie Hamlin and Andy Zinn an opportunity, as well, as they were one of the unfortunate teams to suffer with this breakage.
Now, Jesse Falsoni is kind of one of the cornerstones of the sailing clubs here in Annapolis, and has been central to getting these World Championships up and running and organised. He's now out on the water competing, but we caught up with him a few days ago to hear a little bit more about sailing in Annapolis.
I've always billed this regatta as favoring a team that has diverse skill sets. So if you are a one-trick pony, if you're really good in light air, you're not going to win here. If you're just really good in heavy air, you're not going to win here. You have to be good in all conditions. And I think that's still what we're going to see. We've got a couple more days of racing, and the forecast seems to be improving for later in the week. And I think we're going to get some a little more light air, perhaps, and some medium air, and maybe some heavy air. And, you know, you have to be good all throughout the range to win this title. And I'm adamant that that's going to be the case.
So back on the water with a few minutes to go to our third attempt at starting this race. 10:31 local time, so about 4 minutes or so to the start of this race. And we will see that starting procedure once again with the German boat, with the father and son team, Tim and Finn Berger, head off with the rib right behind them as sort of protection, really.
Yeah, it's also at a certain point, once it's sailed a certain distance, the rib will then stop and hold position to enable any boats that have misjudged thinking they'll sit a little bit later up, allow them to duck down and restart, but it frees that Pathfinder to be able to go off and continue their race. So this is your Pathfinder boat here, father and son team. Of course, at the moment on the starboard tack, so they're just hovering around up by the left side of the committee boat, ready to peel back in and do their responsibility for the Pathfinder.
They are the third best placed German boat in the leaderboard overall, currently sitting in 19th place. They've managed one top 10 finish in race 5, where they came 7th. But otherwise, the best placed German boat was the pairing of Kai Berthelot and Jan Reiferscheidt, who had a tremendous day yesterday in the heavy winds. They won the first of the day's races, then they were 4th and finished the day with a second placed finish, putting them 7th overall. So a terrific performance from them yesterday, and I'm not sure if these conditions suit, because they didn't do quite as well in the lighter conditions earlier in the week. So we will see how Berthelot and Reiferscheidt do today, and if they will still be in the top 10 at the end of the regatta. Down in 15th, and they'll be pretty disappointed by that, Angela Stenger and Nicola Berkner, who, as one of 2 all-female crews in the 87 boat fleet, have a tremendous reputation, incredibly experienced. Bergner, former Olympian from Sydney 2000, and stalwarts of the 505 Worlds. But we would normally expect some better results from them, and they didn't even finish in one of the races yesterday, so the strong winds certainly didn't suit them. Maybe today's conditions will. We will keep an eye on their boat with sail number 9043. So just a few seconds to go before the Berger family start this race off. Past the committee boat. And a lot of shipping that we haven't seen in previous days during racing.
No, there's been a lot of movement and pleasure boats going up and down and people out on the water and a lot of traffic, but certainly from our pictures we've not certainly picked up any of the large shipping. So very interesting to see whether they're coming into shelter due to conditions over the next couple of weeks. But it's certainly not going to be a problem for these guys as they jibe round, do one final 360, a little bit late into the start here. They mistimed that. You can see these two boats very early up onto this line. They're going to struggle to get behind the back of the Pathfinder here. Only just under 7 knots of breeze, 6.5, 7 knots of breeze, so you can see it a challenge.
And it's Barry and Barrows struggling to stay the right side of... And it looks like another general recall.
Again, you saw those boats up really early, sort of on that start, and I say the German team just spinning around quite late on at that point, and people being too early, but really catching these boats out, and in these light 5.5, 7 knot breezes, certainly a bit of an issue on that race course.
I think it's going to be a long morning for these sailors. What's this? Attempt number 3? Yeah.
So
we've had 3 attempts at starting this, the day's only race.
Really great pictures on board here from this is Smith and Gilbert sitting in second place. Just showed that crew, Roger Gilbert tucking in underneath the boom, having a look at what we call the jib slot. And that's the shape of the back of that jib, and does it align with the mainsail? Is the curvature the right side? If you too much jib sheet tension, that will close that leach down and that will stall the boat. And the breeze will also fly off that jib into the front of the main and create, again, an even worse situation. So trying to keep the power on in these boats is going to be really important. But looking at the current wind, we've got 4.8 knots out on the race course, so this breeze is dropping, and you can see it looking quite still and flat out on that water. So this breeze getting a little bit softer, and if we waste too much more time with a general recourse of this breeze, we could end up losing this race in this current situation.
It did look as if one of those official boats was trying to move one of the marks. We just saw them speed through the shot.
So again, this is the position, a very different position to yesterday for the crew. Roger Gilbert here, he would have normally been right out on that trapeze, arms up behind his head, working the boat very hard. Now you can see just trying to keep a little bit of leeward heel on, keeping a bit of momentum. Of course, they're not set up and racing at the moment. This is just tuning, doing a few little checks, ensuring that the boat's set up. So there's a huge amount you can do with the mast, the sail set up, and all the tuning to set the boat up for maximum power in this breeze. And that's certainly what these boats are going to be looking for. Any breeze they can possibly sniff out, that's certainly what they're going to be trying to do. So they've just passed one of the protector ribs, one of the safety boats or mark layer boats, and we know our world champions Mike Holt and Carl Smith are out on the water on one of them. So yeah, I think a bit of a sigh of relief that they won't be putting their championship title on the line in these kind of conditions.
And not just for them, but for the organisers as well. You know, they'll feel more than satisfied that they managed to get those 3 races away whilst they could when the winds were up yesterday. And they'll be relieved that we'll come away with world champions that were fairly crowned.
Well, it's one of these things I really admire from the 505s as a class, is they tend to stick with a lay day in the middle of a regatta, and most regattas still carry a lay day as a bit of a recovery day halfway through the championships. But they are pretty strict on it, that they will not give up their lay day no matter what the conditions, when actually they had some good sailing conditions on the lay day, and on those tricky ones where certain other classes will happily use the lay day to get racing in if they're worried about it. But they didn't feel the need, and this is why this last race is being raced down in on these conditions.
We're about 5 minutes from a restart. Our 4th attempt to get today's race underway. Should be in 4 to 5 minutes from now. You can see the wind now under 6 knots. Race 8, the final race of these World Championships. And although we have our champions crowned already, there are quite a number of crews that will want to be finishing in the podium places in the remaining 2 spots. Andy Smith and Roger Gilbert, we've been on board with them this morning, watching them in the start, and they are currently sitting in 2nd place. They had a poor result in the final race yesterday. They finished 15th, which confirmed and handed that victory to Holt and Smith. And they'll want to bounce back from that. And they've been consistent, Smith and Gilbert, throughout these World Championships. They've had 3 podium finishes, 2 thirds and a 2nd place finish. Poor first race, where they came 10th, but otherwise they've always been top 5 or top 6. In 3rd place, 4 points behind them, the Americans of Ed Conrad and Brian Haynes. And again, mixed fortunes yesterday with a 20th placed finish, but then they also got a 4th and a 6th. And they seem to really be coming into their own as the day went on. David Shelton and Ian Pinnell, well, they seemed dead and buried a couple of days ago, but they seem to have put in some really good performances in recent races to help them move up the leaderboard and into 4th place. Moments when they struggled yesterday in the heavy winds, but they seem to be able to claw positions back to stay in the hunt. And they are 9 points behind 2nd place and 5 points behind 3rd place. And then our 2016 World Champions, they've lost their crown, but potentially they could still finish in 3rd place. Martin and Lowry, they won the final race of the day yesterday. And they sit 11 points behind the 3rd placed boat at the moment. So gorgeous autumn sunshine here in Annapolis, shining down on the city that is home to the US Navy as we count down 2 minutes and 20 seconds until Tim and Finn Berger try and get this start away and make their 4th attempt to get this race underway.
So 1 minute 35 seconds to the start of this race. And the breeze just clocking round towards that right-hand side a little bit. 5.4 knots currently. Very light, tricky conditions. We're certainly seeing this wind as we've been out on the race course, slowly tracking it round towards that right-hand side, which is what has given everybody that opportunity to get that lift off that start, and that's exactly what we saw the restart on that very first race. And then with that breeze still sort of tracking around, but these lighter conditions, we have seen lots of boats being caught out and 2 general recalls now.
So, there go the Germans. The Pathfinder passes that red buoy, or buoy, as they call it here, and begins to open up that start line, and the rest of the fleet tuck in right behind them, anxious to get away. And fingers crossed that our 4th attempt at getting the race away is successful.
Well, an interesting start for those lead boats out early from that Pathfinder boat. One of those boats being the British team of Ian Pennell and David Shelton. Escaping out about 5th, 6th boat out of that pack. You can see how clustered it is there. Oh, someone's mistimed that and hit the start boat. That's exactly the reason to why there is a rib out the back of that boat.
It's to protect the Pathfinder. And what happens to that boat that crashed into the rib?
So I believe that is a breach of the rules, and so they will undertake a penalty and have to restart in. But certainly by having to take a penalty at this part of the race course with everybody here, how disturbed the water is, how light the conditions are, how disturbed all the air is around that start line because of all these boats, it's going to be a very, very costly penalty. So just to give a bit of an idea.
Oh, look, we might have another incident there. Oh, someone right in front. He had nowhere to go and passed just in front of the Pathfinder. And looks like he's just... well, he's kind of stalled there right in front of the rest of the fleet now.
Yeah, that's the
Unfortunately,
problem.
impossible to see that sail number, so we can't name and shame.
Well,
but that will be a start he wants to forget.
I'm going to delve down into the analytics and no one will escape. So I'm just going to rewind this back and just find out who that person was.
So this start line...
that was the Austrian duo, Dean Suter and Brad Clark, that mistimed that start.
The only Austrian boat in the fleet.
So the lead boats coming from that left-hand side that escaped out early are the 2 British boats, Andy Smith, Roger Gilbert, Ian Pennell, David Shelton, and we've also got Mike Martin, Adam Lowry out over there. And certainly for the team that were looking for something a little bit better off this start, That is Conrad and Haynes. They're over towards this right side as we look at it.
So it's a magnificent view as the fleet of 80-odd boats make their way upwind, with Americans really controlling that and dominating the top 10.
Well, here comes this wind again, with it flicking all over the place, and worst case, as we look at that image, we've got breeze down at 3.8 knots at the moment. That's how still those images are. That's exactly what we're looking at now, which isn't wonderful. The breeze still very much over towards that left-hand side as the breeze moved to the right, track back towards the middle, and now it's going out hard towards that left-hand side, and that is where the lead boats are coming from. They've made some big gains, but at the moment, with 3.5, 4 knots of breeze, it's not looking very good here. All the boats just trying to keep up that speed, any momentum possible.
Okay, so as a sailing coach, Corky, obviously very different techniques needed today from yesterday because of the difference in conditions. So what would you say that the three main differences are today? What are the three things to look out for?
Well, the big thing is your movement within the boat. It's got to be a lot smoother. Any movement in the boat is, of course, going to shake that rig, shake the sails, and that disturbs the flow off the sails as well as off the foils. So your movement's got to be still quick, but it's got to be very much like a ballerina, up on the tiptoes and not just clumping around like an elephant in the boat. So that's going to be very, very important. Also, picking the right strategy, looking out, head out the boat, looking for that wind, trying to identify the extra pressure patches, sailing into that pressure. So certainly keeping your head out the boat. And again, another bit is how you've got that boat set up. Trying to minimize maneuvers, not just doing tacks for the sake of tacks. There's got to be a willing shift to engage into. Otherwise, you'll end up just tacking for the sake of tacking, and doing those maneuvers can be a slower section. So keeping your nose clean, minimising maneuvers, being gentle across the boat, and keeping any momentum on possible.
That's two.
That's
two.
Three.
You reckon? I reckon they could be clumped into two.
You'd like
Give us
another
a
one?
fourth.
You'd like a third or a fourth, depending on how you're looking at it. Okay, a third or a fourth, certainly in these light conditions, is your weight is going to be much further forward within the boat. You're trying to keep that big bum of the 505 out of the water, reduce friction, and to keep your weight as far forward, but also down, so going for that aerodynamic side of things, trying to not just be a blocker on that side of things. So you'll see them riding a lot further forward. When yesterday we were watching the crews out on that trapeze, stepping forward to apply the pressure, but their weight a lot further back because you're into planing conditions, when today they certainly won't be even close to planing.
Which is a shame, because these boats look absolutely fantastic when they are planing, when the wind is up. We were really thrilled by some of the images that came off the water yesterday. We saw a few capsizes, a few people getting it wrong because things were happening so fast out there. And it made for a really entertaining sporting spectacle.
Wow.
Belinsky and Harris of Canada currently sitting in the lead, but I think we're going to see those that leaderboard changing over and over again in these conditions with the boats so close together. It's going to take a while before we can establish the establish the front boats.
Well, interesting one of the teams are vying for those top spots. Edward Comrades, Brian Haynes out towards the right-hand side as we look at it. They are the little turquoise streamlet out towards the right. The third, fourth boat from that right-hand side. You can see how far back that little cluster is due to a little sort of 8-10 degree shift towards that left-hand side, favouring that. But now, if we look at those lead two boats, look at the angle change. You can see those lead boats, the Canadian boat and the boat alongside it, the curve that they've started to make. So there's a big right shift coming in. And here, looking at the wind data, we've suddenly gone from 38 degrees with this breeze clocking round very hard towards that left side, now starting to make its way back out towards that right. So some big shifts out on the water, and in these light, challenging conditions, this is going to really put the cat amongst the pigeons with this top leaderboard. So currently looking at Smith and Gilbert are in about 19th position, which again, with the second discard coming in, would not affect the results in that current position.
Now, we wondered about Stenger and Berkner earlier on. We were discussing their prospects today and thinking that although they struggled yesterday in the very heavy, or in the heavy winds, that today might suit them better. Well, there they are, sitting near the front of the fleet right now. Other names to look out for: Shelton and Pinnell of Great Britain sitting 7th. Former champions Martin and Lowry right behind them in 8th.
Amazing the difference between those front couple of boats. Stenger and Berkner way out in front from that lead line and leaving the groups behind. This breeze very, very fickle across the course, shifting one way, back to the next, and now suddenly the Smith and Gilbert parking sort of over towards that left-hand side where the breeze has gone very light, tacking out now. Here they are on board, trying to get back into sync with the shifts. This result wouldn't change their results with a second discard also coming into play after 8 races, which I say, very interesting concept we talk about a lot, and it's brought up with regard to the 505. So with a lot of Olympic sailing classes and many other classes going for either one discard, if not no discards, to keep the racing as tight as possible and make sure that if you slip up, but still running a 2 discard program, and certainly after 8 races, it certainly gives the sailors quite a bit of leeway that if they come away with a couple of bad results, it still shouldn't impact their overall regatta that badly. So light winds on the water. We've got 5.8 knots, you can see in that bottom right corner. So just 0.8 off the required 8 knots, 5 knots, sorry.
Yep. America's Barry and Barrows leading the long crawl to the mark.
But great to see German female duo Stenger and Berkner, as you highlighted, that the breeze really a tough ball for them yesterday, but after taking a win in race number 3 in the lighter conditions, the lighter breeze is back there. So this is your front 2 boats. So Barry and Barrows out in front, but right alongside them Stenger and Berkner as they get up towards the top end of this race course. Been a long old drag, and certainly one with the shifts and the conditions we've got have really separated the fleet out, with many of the top boats looking to secure good positions to hold them in their podium positions, are scattered far and wide across this racecourse.
It also gives us a chance to see some of the crews that we weren't really able to focus on yesterday. The French, for example, Philippe Boit and Florian Corbel, currently sitting in third. The German team, of course. The Canadians aren't too far back either in the top 10, and it'll be a chance to watch them. Obviously, the leading teams dominated the coverage yesterday, but this way we have a chance to see some of the others in action.
So
Conradson, Haynes and Pennell and Shelton now falling way back down the fleet.
Well, the one team that are favouring from the current positions at the moment are the US team defending champions, Martin and Lowry, who are up in the top 5 boats there, so we can see them 4th currently. Well, this could be good enough that if the positions remained, would see them claim 2nd place. So the pressure is on still between Martin, Lowry and Smith and Gilbert.
Immense experience on board that American boat. Martin and Lowry, they're a formidable team in this 505. 7 national championships to their names, and to Mike Martin's name for sure, both as a crew and as a helm. Now what about Howie Hamlin and Andy Zinn? 2 legendary names in the 505 scene, and they started well. They started the regatta well in the light winds with 3 top 5 finishes, including a victory. But yesterday didn't suit them. And then they had that breakage that cost them. Well, they weren't able to finish the final race. Where are they now? They're currently sitting 20th in this race, 7th overall. Howie Hamlin, who's been a real mainstay of the 505 scene for so many years.
Lead boat getting up to the top mark. Be pleased to know Barry and Barrows up round that top mark. They lead here, tightly followed by the female duo Stenger and Berkner. Defending champions Mike Martin, Adam Lowry in a solid position here and really doing everything they possibly can to climb up that extra point on the ladder. French team up in 4th, 5th Tyler Moore and Rob Wolfall. We've seen them appear numerous times throughout the week. And they're just left a picture by the side of, there we can see Andy Smith and Roger Gilbert. So starting to claw their way back up again through some of the points, but certainly not the position they want to be in.
Yeah, Smith and Gilbert currently sitting outside the top 20. These are our leaders from the USA. well used to sailing on the East Coast, the pair from New York, enjoying themselves here on Chesapeake Bay off the coast of Annapolis. And it looks, and we can get the data to confirm this, but it looks like they're extending their lead at the front.
They certainly, essentially getting round that top mark. You can see there was about 40 metre, 30-40 metre from that top mark, and now extending out. They've got a nice little bit of breeze. Still very light though. Look at that breeze in that bottom right hand corner, 4 knots, 4.7. So very light, fickle breezes. And they'll just be keeping fingers crossed that this breeze stays with them enough for this race to be concluded. We have heard that they are shortening the course up a little bit and squeezing that. So there has been a movement of the leeward marks. So that is to adjust to the lighter conditions and certainly not wanting to lose anything of this race. They'll just squeeze the course up a little bit and keep fingers crossed that the breeze will enable all competitors to get round this race course. But there,
it has picked up a little bit on that right side now.
Certainly looking out on the further side of the screen on that top right, there's Edward Conrad and Brian Haynes. So we were talking about them, about their position and needing a solid position to try and maybe tow them up the leaderboard, but certainly where they are, they're deep back in that pack. A lot of work still to do. The people that have really applied the pressure is Mike Martin and Adam Lowry, currently up in third place. And if this remains, the pressure is firmly on Smith and Gilbert and could see them slip down to third place and make it to Stars and Stripes 1 and 2. So out in front, even though this breeze is light, keeping momentum up, keeping that speed up. I'm sure doing all of the tips that we've just chatted about, every little bit of ounce out the front, but great performance.
Again, using your coaching knowledge, yesterday, you know, it's pretty obvious what the crew are doing. You can see them in action, you can see them working hard, you can see them pulling on the ropes. It's a bit more subtle today. What are they busy doing?
Well, it's actually one of those easier things in the stronger breeze because you can feel the power within the sheet. So when that big giant spinnaker we're looking at there has lots of power in, it instantly wants to pull out of your hand, so you can feel that pressure. So the crew's now holding that sheet in fingertips and just trying to feel that pressure, keeping that kite flying all the time and as much, and so you can see how unstable it is. The water's still fairly disturbed and chopped around. So actually that spinnaker looking quite wrinkled and unstable and flopping around. Well, actually, the crew will be working extremely hard using the guy, which helps pull the spinnaker round towards that windward side, and the sheet, which enables them to extend that kite out in front of the boat, and controlling both of those. And it's a perfect balancing act of stopping that. When that spinnaker collapses and you lose the power, it can stall your speed, but also takes a little while for it to get back out again. But with the breeze this light on the race course, it is very difficult to keep any kind of speed going on that spinnaker. And it's actually very relentless for the crew. When the breeze is in, they can actually, you can feel the pressure and you can trim it a lot easier because you can feel that curling point that you're looking for on a spinnaker. When in these light breezes, the very smallest touches are required. Look at the distance. And now those boats behind, darker patch, are in breeze, are closing the gap. So it looks like our lead boat, a big angle change for them, trying to come up to that breeze. And these boats now with the blue spinnaker, and you can see the SAP logo and the yellow kite and the white kite all tucked in behind. That is Mike Martin, the French team alongside them, and also Stenger and Berkner, all coming down with good breeze. So these fleet have got it, and actually this lead boat, Barry and Barrows, struggling for this breeze now.
Yeah, on board with Douglas Hagen and Shane Illich, the American team.
So now that lead boat distance shortened a little bit. The breeze has caught back up with them now back onto similar paths as before, but certainly had to take a bit of a much higher angle to get back up to that breeze, and this is what makes it such a challenging race course. When the breeze is this light, it's very easy for breeze to fill into a section of the race course that you might not get access to, or it comes to you a little bit later, and it allows a real sort of opportunity for people to make that jump when they've got the breeze. But then when it shuts down, and so you can see the angle change again from the boats up in the background, now starting to sail at least 8 to 10 degrees higher than Barry and Barrows in the front of the picture here on the right hand side with a white spinnaker.
Our leading boat, Matthew Barry and Thomas Barrows of the United States, covering the meters to that mark and concluding leg 3 of 7. We have 7 legs scheduled for this race. The brown waters of Chesapeake Bay forming the background for this 505 fleet, and it's USA, France, Germany, USA. That's the order of things, and what a beautiful shot that is, looking down the fleet. Like coloured balloons out on the water.
So you can see that lead extending out on the front. That was that angle change. Now jibed on to starboard to be able to soak a little bit lower. Breeze up to about 5.3 knots. You can see the fleet spread across, but looking for those darker patches across the water, it's all fairly consistent. All looks fairly shiny across that water. One of the hardest things for the teams is concentration, keeping themselves focused on the sails, on their competitors, and not just getting a bit bored, monotonous, just cruising along, watching the same thing. And so keeping that focus on that spinnaker and still trying to generate
your
lots of power.
description of what the crew will be doing right now does sound like, yesterday it was all quite physical. Today it's far more mental.
Exactly, and then this is why, and I think sort of we listened to that interview with Jesse before, and how he's saying that the champion that will go away has to have a good, strong skill set across all different breezes.
Definitely an all-rounder.
And that's exactly what is being required here. They've had the lighter breezes in the start of the week and through. They had good, solid breeze yesterday, but the lighter breezes have returned for this final race of the 2017 SAP 505 Worlds.
And that comment about the winner needing to be an all-rounder is interesting, because, you know, Mike Holt always has a reputation for being excellent in strong winds, but lighter winds were not his strength. But you look at the results over the last few days, and in the light winds early on, he got a second, he got a first, and then again yesterday he came into his own. In fact, his results were better in the light winds than in the heavy winds, because he got 2/3 and a first yesterday in the heavy winds. But as he's pointed out, he has gone away and trained and sort of honed his light air skills, and that's obviously paid off, and that's the mark of a world champion.
Very much so, being able to deal with the conditions you're given, but also putting the time into the areas that you're weakest at. And that's we see in multiple nations, certainly in youth sort of fleets, and we do see it as it gets stronger, that of course you're always going to have a slight bias to the conditions that you normally sail in. So back in the UK, we're seen as more the heavy weather sort of sailors, and then countries like Australia and so on with those stronger breezes. But then suddenly you head to the lakes of Geneva and Hungary and Balaton, and you get a lot lighter conditions. So we see a lot more of the Europeans being lighter. So you can see the breeze very light with these boats trying to make their way down to the gate mark, with the arrowhead of this lead fleet tracking back upwind now.
We're on board with the 19th placed boat in this race, Douglas Hagen and Shane Illich, 15th overall in the leaderboard. Doug wanting to impress here. He's come home, so to speak, to compete in these World Championships. He lives in Maui, but he is from Annapolis and competed in the Club 420 World Championships out of the Severn Sailing Association, which is exactly where we're standing right now, back in 1984. So an immense amount of experience on board this boat we're watching. And for Doug Hagen, a sort of a return to home waters here in Annapolis. But at the front, it's still the American pair that have been leading for so much of this race.
Well, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, was that the next World Championships will be at the end of 2018 and bridging 2019, so it's a long time before the next Championships, which makes Mike Holt and Carl Smith have a long reign of their title, and quite a long time before they have to go back and defend it, with the next World Championships going down under to Fremantle, Australia, and I'm sure a very different race course to what we expect here.
Sail down there?
Sailed down in Fremantle a few times. It's talked a lot about the Doctor, which is the wind down there, and when the Doctor switches it on, it's all really good strong breeze, temperatures, hot temperatures, but tend to get a lot of strong breezes down there, and I'm sure of course there'll be a much larger contingency of Australian boats there as well, battling it out on the waters in Fremantle.
Those are the leaders. You can see the second place French team, Yacht and Corbel. But will Martin and Lowry reel them in? It's all pretty close for that second place spot.
Well, in the current situation with Martin and Lowry doing a good enough job up in this top three here, that will see them gain the points they need to climb up the ladder and leapfrog the British pairing of Andy Smith and Roger Gilbert, who currently are back in 20th. They need to get above 15th and into those early teen races, into those places, sorry, for them to hold on to second place. So we could see that place change still at the top of the table.
But how are the team aiming to hold on to their overnight second place? The team that started this race in second place overall, how are they doing? We're on board with them, but they are currently sitting in 20th place, which is pretty disastrous because it actually drops them a place down the leaderboard into third, and it sees Mike Martin and Adam Lowry, 2016 world champions, who are currently sitting third, sees them move into the silver medal position overall. Confirmation of what I've just said, a little silver dot has appeared next to Martin and Lowry's name.
Well, interesting. With this on-board camera, it was perfect. We saw the difference in wind strength too. Gilbert being up on the side with the trapeze, not going out onto it, but certainly keeping his weight up onto the deck, and then that breeze going soft again, both sliding into that boat. Quick check of that jib slot from Gilbert there to make those little adjustments. But certainly need to find some extra speed or a nice little shift. This breeze flicking around all over the place now, with some much greater wind shifts out on the water.
Interesting, you were talking about the conditions, sailing conditions in Fremantle for the next World Championships. I had a really interesting discussion yesterday for my Sailing Uncovered podcast with Mike Holt, our world champion, and Jesse Falsoni, who's out there on the water competing, but from the local yacht club, and we were discussing the merits of sailing on the west coast in California, which is where Mike Holt is based. He sails out of Santa Cruz, compared to sailing here on the east coast in Annapolis. And you know, they were saying that it's a thinking sailor's playground, this east coast, because of the difficult wind conditions, whereas California, it's all about put on as big a sail as you can, get out there and sail as fast as you can in a straight line and go and have some fun. But I think the conclusion was that the water temperatures are so different. Relatively warm this side, reaching 24 degrees sometimes on this side on the Atlantic, whereas in the Pacific on the west coast they're generally around 12, 13 degrees, which is surprising because you always consider California, you know, to be the sunshine state, and so the conclusion was it depends whether you're a warm, hot weather sailor or whether you just want to go fast and be cold. And we'll be putting that interview out with those two. As it's amusing moments, we'll be putting that out in the next month or so. Just Google it, Corky. You were asking me about how you find that podcast. Just Google Sailing Uncovered.
Sailing Uncovered. Learn a thing or two. So the wind out there certainly still flicking around, presenting plenty of opportunities for big gains to be made, but also the opportunity for losses. 40 degrees across that race course from what we've seen from one end to the other. Big shifts available. And trying to harness one of those shifts and speed is Smith and Gilbert, but at the moment, a long way back in the mid part of the fleet, looking for breeze, and that shot shows it exactly there, how big their challenge is. So continuing at the front of the fleet though, Barry and Barrows have led at mark number 1 and continue to lead here. The guys that are really starting to apply the pressure are the British team there that we can see, Ian Pinnell and David Shelton. They were up into 12th place at the first mark and have crept their way, sailed those shifts, kept the speed down, and they are now up into that top 3. No surprise to see where they made that big gain. They were the quickest boat out on the water and sailed one of the shortest distance.
And Pinnell.
Yes, and made a good gain of 4 places on leg 3, which took them up to 8th place. And then currently, this last leg has seen them climb 3-4 more places up into that top few spots. So really applying the pressure in this final upwind leg.
Our leaders are through the gate. 2 more legs to go. So, what about the team that began the day second overall and heading for silver? How are they getting along? Well, they're currently sitting in 25th place. We've got 2 discards, so that'll be discarded, but that still leaves them in 3rd place overall. They've slipped a place, Martin and Lowry moving up to 2nd. But there's 2 points between them at the moment as Martin and Lowry sit in 4th place.
And this is it. It all comes down to Smith and Gilbert really starting to having to crawl up this fleet. This is their discard. They're going to need a huge jump up this leaderboard for the discard to be switched to another event. But what they will be doing is keeping their fingers crossed that Martin and Larry will be reeled in by a couple more boats, because that is what they need. They need Martin and Larry to be passed by 2 or 3 more boats to enable them to hold on to 2nd place. I don't think they can certainly do any...
they can't do any more, really. I've just checked their previous positions. So they were 15th in yesterday's final race. That's obviously one of their 2 discards. And their next worst position is 10th. So it's looking highly unlikely, as you say, that they're going to crawl back the positions and move into the top 10. So I think this race is going to be a discard for them. So what can Martin and Lowry do? Well, they've just moved up into third place. And now up into second place. So the 2016 World Champions showing some real skill and patience in these light conditions. Doing all they can. Sitting second overall and second in this race.
And they're doing everything they need to. And that is it. It is being patient, as you say. Being focused just in on this last race. Because it is coming down to them. Smith and Gilbert have made the mistake, and this will be their discard. And so it is completely down to Martin and Lowry to not lose these positions. The points are all with them, but if they were to slip back a few places, that would be their second place over. But certainly the way they're sailing and how they're up into this top three boats, they're doing a superb job and doing everything possible to take second place as it stands.
Just checking out the distances between the leaders and the rest of the fleet. They have come down a little bit on this leg. But certainly it's so close and light at the moment that the distances between second, third and fourth and indeed fifth are all so close that they're constantly changing. Still very much a difficult one to call. The only ones who seem to be in a good position, who can be confident of their position at the moment, Barry and Barrows, out in front. Now, we were discussing yesterday about the 505 class and the fact that there are parts of it that you can change and alter and improve. Will they have had a very different setup? Will they have spent a long time in the boat park this morning, changing things around, re-rigging after yesterday's stronger winds for today's conditions?
Well, many of the sailors have suits of sails to differ for different conditions, so a heavy wind suit or a light wind with different cuts, but many sticking with one that is a bit of a hybrid and can cope with multiple conditions. But the rig setup, certainly what you're doing is you'll be looking to pull the mast back towards the back of the boat in the stronger breeze, and what we're calling raking the boat back. But then they'll be looking to have the mast much more upright to generate power, because certainly in these light winds, all they'll be doing is trying to maximise every bit of power they can. When yesterday, with the breeze they were looking to depower their boats. They had too much. You could see them trying to flog that top part of the mainsail out, and the crew being hard out on that wire. And so it came down to depowering, when today is very much about powering up and doing everything possible. But certainly a pretty dingy park for them all to be down in, and plenty to distract them while working on the boats. There's lots of activity here out on the water, and can see why it is the capital of sailing here.
So we've mentioned the 12 nations that are represented here at this particular World Championship in Annapolis. Let me just run through some of the countries and their best placed boats at the moment. The best placed Australians are 21st overall, although they're having a real mare of a race in this particular race. They're currently well down in the 70s. Nigel Lott and Bob Franks, but obviously they'll discard that, and so currently they're 21st overall as the best placed Australians. As things stand, their nearest Australian challengers are 23rd, 2 places behind Malcolm Higgins and Marcus Cooper. The one Irish boat in the fleet, currently 34th overall, Peter Scannell, and John Dunley, currently 39th in this race, and doing their very best to try and move forwards. They had a good time in the strong winds, leading one of the races yesterday for a short period of time. But the Irish sitting 34th overall right now. Canadians, Jeff Boyd and Rachel Boyd, sitting 41st overall in the leaderboard. As things stand, 51st in this race. Over 80 boats taking part in this fleet, remember. And just one Danish boat competing here in Annapolis. They are Jesper Bullo and Søren Asbo Jorgensen, and they are sitting 49th overall, 67th in this current race. And what about the Finns? They retired in yesterday's final race, Petri Ebeling and Antti Salonen. They're 53rd overall and currently sitting 64th in this race. And I'm just going to find the Bermudians as well, who are 70th overall. Gary Taylor and Brett Wright have come down the coast, so to speak, from Bermuda and are sitting 65th in this race. And I had a catch up with the Japanese pairing last night as well. They were very late off the water, having finished well down the fleet in the final race. Shiro Noguchi and Takao Fujita, 81st overall, and currently sitting 82nd in this race, which may well be the last place boat, I think, in this particular race.
Well, while you've just been giving us a good update on all of those competitors out on the water, I've been having a look at the analytics and to the regatta rank, where we can see where places have been gained onto this final race. And Martin and Larry back in 5th going into this last race, and at the moment will have jumped up to 2nd. Place dropped.
Terrific performance so far then for them.
Yeah, places dropping for Smith and Gilbert, Conrad and Haynes, and also Shelton and Pinnell, all dropping places. And other big gain, of course, is from our lead boat, Barry and Barrows, who were 16th going into today's race, but sitting in 1st place at the moment. If they take this race win, we'll see them move up to 13th. And so some big gains going on. Again, of course, for Howie Hamlin and Andy Zinn at 9th. After yesterday's racing, we'll see them jump up a couple of places, which is say we saw them come in early on that last race yesterday because of the breakage of the trapeze ring.
We're coming to that final gate. The leaders are round and heading upwind to the finish line on this final leg, and still very much in control, although that lead has dropped by about 40 metres. And the French are into 2nd. with Martin and Lowry in third place. But let's wait until those all those leading boats are round, and then just give the data a few seconds to reach us off the water, and then we can better confirm the top 5 of the race. So Barry and Barrows leading, Martin and Lowry in second place, Boit and Corbel of France in third, but battling it out with Stenger and Berkner for that third spot. And let's not forget the Brits, Batchelor and Bird, who seem to have clawed their way into the top 5. Now, is that distance correct? Because if it is, the French have just reeled in about 70 metres on the leaders.
That
is correct.
Big shift that came in around that bottom gate and has enabled the boats to close the gap on that lead boat. So you can see them leading out with that lead turquoise line. The French just up to the right, but now that breeze shifting back round again, and so the gain suddenly going back to the States team. It shows how quickly this breeze is flicking around on that race course. The advantage being played out. And the team that are certainly making some place gains are that British team of Smith and Gilbert. They were back in 22nd. They're now up to 13th. So still work to be done, and still reliant on Martin and Lowry to have a little slip up on this last upwind leg to the finish. So
just 3 points between them at the moment.
It is not over on this upwind leg to the finish. We could see those place changes happen again with the breeze moving around to the right hand side by some considerable way. It's going to be a bit more of a drag race for these sailors, and so it's not going to present huge opportunity for these boats to overtake. So a nice overview there of the lead boats as they look back down towards the gate mark, and that is Smith and Gilbert just going round, so you can see the distance that they've got to claw in and why, even if they pull up a few more places, they are reliant on the defending champions making a few mistakes and slipping down the leaderboard in this race. At the moment, the advantage to the Americans, but all still to play for as they make their way up to the finish line on race number 8.
So let's check out the atmosphere on board that boat. Smith and Gilbert, knowing that they've got to try and claw the positions, but equally probably keeping an eye on the leaders if they can see them. They're so far ahead, and hoping that Martin and Lowry will start to drop places, because that is the only hope for this British pair of regaining second place overall in this World Championship.
Well, and that's exactly what is happening at the moment. Martin and Lowry down to 5th. That would give 1 point separation between those boats. So yes, Smith and Gilbert need to claw up some places. If they could make 4 more places, that would give them an extra point in the bag and create their 10th place as a discard rather than their current 13th. But it does still rely on Martin and Lowry. Can the other British boat, Shelton and Pinnell, leapfrog that American boat and give the other British boat back their second place? Well, with the wind round towards this right-hand side again, it's becoming a bit more of a drag race. It's one long starboard leg, so not the upwind leg that Smith and Gilbert need. They need a lot squarer course to be able to put in some tack, sail those shifts, when at the moment it is just a solid drag race for those boats.
And very soon, into view on the left-hand side will come the finish line. Barry and Barrows heading that way and looking good to seal victory with a 50-metre lead on the following pack.
So again, right on the borderline, as this wind has proved throughout this last race. This is the British team, Shelton and Pinnell. Currently, as you see, it bouncing around from 5th place to 4th as they battle it out for these final places in race 8.
So the front of the fleet seems to have steadied. We were having a lot of overtakes and changes in 3rd, 4th and 5th, but at the moment it looks like Stenger and Berkner of Germany, the one of 2 all-female crews, currently sitting in 2nd. Martin and Lowry in 3rd. Moore and Wolfall. Rob Wolfall, a former world champion alongside Mike Holt from 2014. They are 4th. Nathan Batchelor, Norman Bird of Great Britain in 5th, just ahead of their compatriots David Shelton and Ian Pinnell.
Just ping Julian a message. So, this breeze in the middle part of the track, as we've seen, it's been a pretty one-sided race course, and this wind moving further and further round towards this right-hand side is going to favour those boats on that right-hand side of the course. And certainly could put paid to Shelton and Pinnell's hopes, as they're going to have to tack and come back on a long-headed tack. So we can see
our leaders here.
They are on that headed tack, but they need to come across towards that footage and towards the finish line. So there is the finish line. As we look at it, the lead boat just appearing in shot now.
And so the American pair, who have led round the mark on every leg from start to finish of this race, come towards the finish line. Matthew Barry and Thomas Barrows of New York cross that finish line. They pump the air. They have won the final race of the 505 World Championships here in Annapolis. Second place is going to go to the Germans of Angela Stenger and Nicola Berkner. Again, they've been there or thereabouts at the front of the fleet for most of the race, with third place to Mike Martin and Adam Lowry. And that is the significant result that we've been waiting for, because that means it confirms that Martin and Lowry take second place overall in this World Championship. The former World Champions had to settle for second this time round in 2017.
Well, what a tough race course, and that last race with the wind shifting all over the place and being just on this borderline of 4 to 5 knots, it has shaken up that leaderboard and brought those final places into play.
So here in Annapolis in 2017, the overall result is a reversal of the result in 2016, when Mike Martin and Adam Lowry won it in the UK, and Mike Holt and Carl Smith had to settle for second place. This time round, it's Holt and Smith as champions, with Martin and Lowry in second. And the British pairing of Andy Smith and Roger Gilbert, who are yet to finish, are going to have to settle for that bronze medal position. Third place finish with 3 points between them and Martin and Lowry.
So certainly the champagne being celebrated here for the States boats. First and second place. And one British boat completing that podium position. But a hard-fought battle across that. And here we have Smith and Gilbert still battling it out, and they've done very well, pulling their way up the leaderboard on today's race, where they were a long way back in 20th place at the first mark and have clawed their way back to about 12th position that they're fighting out for on the finish line now. But what could have been if they'd been further up that leaderboard, and something that only they will be able to analyse later on.
I mean, ultimately, it was more, I think, about yesterday's result in the final race of the day, where they came 15th. It was the result that didn't just hand the title to Holt and Smith, but I think ultimately it's cost them second place as well.
But a superb race from Matthew Barry and Thomas Barrows. This celebration as they went across that line, it's a great feeling to know that they will have bounced their way up the leaderboard in that final race. And also a comment we always say as a coach, you're only as good as your last race, and well, to finish first on that last race,
that makes them world champions, doesn't it?
Well, there you go. Something for them to take away and be very, very happy about.
So confirmation of the leading boats in this final race of the World Championships then. It was won by Matthew Barry and Thomas Barrows. Second went to the Germans, Angela Stenger and Nicola Berkner. Then came two teams from the USA, Mike Martin and Adam Lowry, Tyler Moore and Rob Wolfall. Fifth place to the Britons, Nathan Batchelor and Norman Bird. And then came the French, Philippe Watt and Florian Corbel in sixth, with David Shelton and Ian Pennell of Britain in seventh. Then Christopher Sagerblom and Eric Anderson, who I believe led the race briefly at the very start. They settled for eighth in the end. Conrads and Mundell of the USA were ninth. And then came another British pair, Andy Smith and Roger Gilbert, who we've discussed. And Malcolm Higgins and Marcus Cooper of Australia, the best placed Australian boat in this final race of the regatta. Howie Hamlin, who we've also discussed this morning, came in 12th. So, Corky, you've been to a few World Championships in your time. I think this is my third 505 World Championship. Sum up your highs and lows.
Well, I think the really big thing has been that no matter what conditions are thrown at you as a sailor, at any location, you have got to be able to deal with all of it. And that includes the days where there is no wind and the frustration of sitting on shore, playing the waiting game, which we've all done, and trying to keep your mind focused, and then be able to step back out and deal with complete different range of conditions. And this is exactly what we've had at this championship. And so, again, I don't think you ever have a bad championship. I think there's a mixed bag of conditions, and certainly the conditions that have been here in Annapolis have been challenging, and that's exactly what we want from a World Championship. And the lead boat, World Champions Mike Holt and Carl Smith, dealt with the cards they were played, dealt with those conditions, and certainly were the ones that have been worthy winners here in Annapolis.
So there we can see our third placed team finishing their final race of the regatta, as the sun comes out once again here in Annapolis. Frustrating day for them on the water. But it has been an extraordinary week, 10 days here at the 2017 Worlds in Annapolis. You can't say often enough how, the city calls itself the US capital of sailing. And you can't say often enough just how busy the waters are here off Annapolis. And yesterday, after racing, a load of youth sailors came down with their mums and dads after school, got the boats out, off they went, and then came back and managed to catch up with some of the 505 sailors and get some tips from some of the best sailors in the world. So it was, it's been great hospitality, and it's been great to see. And we can now confirm the overall leaderboard with our winners, all signed, sealed and delivered yesterday for Mike Holt and Carl Smith, our 2017 World Champions. So dominant, they didn't even have to race today. Second place then to the other American pair and the 2016 World Champions, Mike Martin and Adam Lowry. And then came Andy Smith and Roger Gilbert, whose campaign went a little awry in the final two races of the regatta. and left them in 3rd place overall. Edward Conrads and Brian Haynes in 4th place, flying the American flag, and then David Shelton and Ian Pinnell of Great Britain in 5th. But really, there was just, between the 5th place boat and the 2nd place boat, it was just 11 points between them. So it was all pretty close in the end. But we have to say, congratulations to Mike Holt and Carl Smith, who've been out on the water today, presumably giving some advice. And these are preliminary, because obviously the whole of the fleet has not finished yet, but we can just look through this overall leaderboard as we watch the boats, the rear of the fleet, crossing the finish line in the background there.
Well, very tricky for the boat, still racing with the breeze down to 3.5, 4 knots. So very, very light conditions trying to get across that there. And there's the image just there with how light the breeze is. And let's hope all those boats get across that finish line in the time span available.
So it's 18 months between now and the next World Championship. That's going to be in Fremantle in Australia. A very different experience for the sailors down there.
Very much so. There's can be big breezes a lot of the time, and certainly will favour some of the heavier weight sailors, but also renowned, the same as this place has had, some lighter conditions as well. So again, we could see a real mixed bag, but certainly the predicted wins, if the doctor plays ball, will be stronger conditions.
Okay, so that wraps up our live coverage from Annapolis of the 505 World Championships. Remember, you can go to sapsailing.com. All the data and the analytics that Corky here has been working on the computer, you can access at home, sapsailing.com. It's just a wealth of information.
Well, it's huge. It's all set out to make sailing more simple to follow and watch, and it does exactly that. But then, if you want to delve down into all the nitty-gritty and the details of it, it is all available on sapsailing.com.
Thank you for watching and for following us over the last few days here in Annapolis. Thanks to everyone at the yacht clubs that have hosted this event for looking after us so well and giving us the whole of the bar balcony to enjoy and to watch the sailing from. And we just finish off really by saying congratulations to Mike Holt and Carl Smith, and we'll see you in Fremantle in 2018. But for now, it's goodbye.